Picture the most powerful man in the world, the king of an empire that owns a quarter of the planet. Now take away his eyes, take away his ears, take away his mind. Lock him in a suite of rooms in the coldest corner of a castle. Dress him in a purple gown because he can no longer dress himself, and let his beard grow white and long because razors are no longer safe around him. Give him a harpsichord he plays to an audience of nobody, conversations he holds with people who died decades ago, and windows he cannot see out of, overlooking a kingdom he no longer knows he rules. That's Windsor Castle in January 1820, and that's George III, the king who lost America, the king who fought Napoleon, the king who reigned for 59 years, longer than any English monarch before him. He is 81 years old, blind, deaf, insane, and he has been a prisoner in his own castle for 9 years while his son runs the country in his name, and tonight he is going to die. We're going back there tonight. Not as historians reading dispatches, not as tourists gawking at the state apartments. We're going in through the servants' door into the cold northern rooms where the mad king lives, and we're going to spend his last day on earth standing 3 feet away from him. Everything the people around him saw, smelled, heard, and had to endure. One day, one person, the whole strange, sad, freezing machinery of a king's death. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just quietly fascinated by blind kings talking to dead daughters in freezing castles at 4 a.m. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Pull the blanket up. Here we go. The first thing you need to understand is this. You're not allowed to speak to him. That is the rule that governs your entire existence. You spend 12 hours a day in the same room as the King of England, close enough to smell his breath, close enough to catch him when he stumbles, and you are forbidden, absolutely on pain of dismissal, from ever letting him know you are there. Not because you are beneath him, though you are, but because he is deaf and blind, and if he feels an unfamiliar hand on his arm, an unexpected presence in his darkness, he panics, he screams, he fights. An old man of 81 fighting shadows, and it takes 3 of you to hold him without bruising him, because if the doctors find a bruise on the king's body, someone loses their position, and that someone is never a doctor. So you have learned to be a ghost. You have learned to walk on the outside edges of your feet so the floorboards don't creak. You have learned to breathe through your mouth slowly so that even your breathing has no rhythm he might sense. You have learned that in this apartment, at the end of the world, in the dead cold of an English winter, the most important skill a human being can possess is the ability to not exist. Your name is Thomas Ansell. You're 19 years old. You've been at Windsor for 2 years, and before that you were the 4th son of a tenant farmer near Abingdon, which means you are nothing, headed nowhere, one bad harvest away from the workhouse. Your uncle, who spent 30 years in the castle kitchens, got you in. He told you it was the luckiest day of your life. Some mornings, standing frozen in the dark corner of a madman's bedroom, waiting for the most famous invalid in Europe to wake up screaming or singing or weeping, you wonder about that. But you also know what 19-year-old farm boys are doing this winter, out beyond the castle walls. The war has been over for 5 years and the country is broken. Soldiers back from Waterloo begging in the roads with their medals still on their coats. Bread riots. The Peterloo massacre only 5 months ago. Cavalry riding into a crowd in Manchester. Sabres out. Women and children cut down for asking to vote. 11 dead. The whole country is a kettle with the lid tied shut. And you You sleep in a warm attic, you eat meat twice a day, and your only task is to watch an old blind man die slowly in the most comfortable prison in the world. Luck is a strange word, but it might still apply. Your eyes open in darkness, and for half a second you don't know where you are. Then the cold tells you. Nowhere else in your life has ever been this particular kind of cold. The cold of stone that has been soaking up English winter for 600 years and radiating it back into the air like a black sun. Your breath hangs above your face. Water in the jug by your bed has a skin of ice on it, thin as a communion wafer, and you will have to break it with your knuckle to wash. Then the smell arrives, in layers, the way it always does. Tallow smoke first, greasy and sharp, from the candle you let burn too long last night. Then damp wool, your own blanket, which never fully dries between October and April. Then, underneath, the deep bass note of the castle itself. Cold stone, old wood smoke, mildew in the corners nobody plasters, and the faint sweetness of decay from somewhere in the walls, because a building this old always has something dead in it somewhere. A rat, a bird in a chimney. You've stopped wondering, and under all of it, yourself. You washed on Sunday. It is Saturday. Do the arithmetic. Everyone in this castle, from the scullery boys to the royal dukes, smells like a body wearing clothes, and the only difference money makes is what you layer on top of it. Lavender water for the pages, orange flower for the equerries, nothing at all for you. Welcome to Windsor Castle, the 29th of January 1820. You are lying on a straw-stuffed pallet in an attic above the North Range, in a room you share with a boy called Joseph Meadows, who is 17 from Bray, and who grinds his teeth in his sleep so loudly you sometimes want to hold a pillow over his face. Not seriously. Mostly not seriously. Below you, 2 floors down, behind double doors and a corridor where a page sits awake all night, is the king. Not the fat one in London who signs things and gambles and gets booed in the streets. That's the regent. That's the son. The real one. The old one. The one the bell ringers will ring for when it happens. And everyone in this castle knows, has known for 5 days now, that it is going to happen soon. Because on Sunday the king stopped eating. Not refused. Stopped. There is a difference, and you have learned it this week. Refusing is an act. The king has done plenty of refusing in his 9 years of madness. Hurled basins, clamped his jaw shut, spat medicine at Dr. Willis's men in the old days, back when they still strapped him into the chair he called, with terrible clarity, his coronation chair. But this is not that. This is a body quietly closing its accounts. A mouthful of bread soaked in milk on Monday, a spoonful of jelly on Wednesday. Since Thursday, nothing but a little water. And yesterday, not even that. Just wetted lips from a sponge. And the sponge is your job, which is why your hands still smell faintly of chamomile and something else you don't want to name. The castle knows. Buildings know these things before people say them. The kitchens have gone quiet. The chapel has doubled its candles. Yesterday you saw 2 of the regent's men arrive on leathered horses, and the head page, Mr. Brawn, has started sleeping in his clothes. The bell in the curfew tower strikes 6. You count the strokes lying flat on your back, watching your breath, and on the last one you make yourself move, because Mr. Brawn will have your hide if you're not downstairs, washed, dressed, and invisible by 1/2 past. The floor is ice under your bare feet. Actual pain in the first 3 steps, like walking on the flat of a knife. Joseph groans and burrows deeper into his blanket. His watch doesn't start until noon, the lucky swine. You break the ice on the jug with 2 knuckles, and the crack of it is loud in the dark, and the water underneath is so cold it burns your face like a slap. And this is how every day of your winter begins, with a small violence against yourself done quickly before your courage fails. Your clothes are where you left them, folded on the stool, and every piece of them says exactly what you are. A plain dark coat of good wool. Good, mind you, better than anything your father ever owned. Because the king's household does not dress its servants in rags, appearances matter here more than food. Black breeches, worn shiny at the knee from kneeling at grates. Wool stockings darned at both heels by your own hand badly. And shoes with buckles, actual buckles, plain steel, but buckles, which 2 years ago would have made you the grandest man at Abingdon Fair, and which here mark you precisely as what you are, the lowest breathing creature permitted into the presence of the king. You dress fast, fingers clumsy with cold, fumbling the coat buttons, and here's a thing nobody tells you about service. Your hands are never fully warm from November to March. The skin across your knuckles is cracked in fine red lines that sting when you flex them, and there is a split at the corner of your right thumbnail that has not healed since Advent, because it never gets the chance. Every day it's cold water, coal dust, lye soap, cold air, and by evening the split has opened again and you suck it absently like a child. Down the back stairs in the dark, one hand on the frozen iron rail, 42 steps, you've counted them 100 times. Past the door where the under-butlers sleep, past the long window on the landing where, on a clear morning, you can see the Thames lying in its valley like a strip of dull pewter, and the smoke of the town rising straight up in the still air, and beyond it, 20 miles east, an orange-brown stain on the horizon that is London, half the sky ruined by the coal smoke of 1,000,000 people, visible from here every day like the smudge of a dirty thumb on the edge of the world. No time to look this morning. This morning the landing window is still black. At the bottom of the stairs the world changes. Warmth, real warmth, rolling out of the servants' hall in a wave, thick with the smell of bread and small beer and frying bacon fat, and the bodies of 40 people who all washed on Sunday too. Noise held low. Nobody laughs loudly in the castle this week. The maids whisper, the footmen murmur. A great house where the master is dying is like a church where the sermon never ends. You get bread, a slab of cold bacon, beer that tastes of the barrel. You eat standing up at the end of the long table, because juniors don't sit while seniors are eating, and everyone senior to you is eating, and everyone in this room is senior to you. You eat fast, wipe your mouth on the back of your cracked hand, and you're still chewing the last of the bread when Mr. Brawn appears in the doorway and looks directly at you, which he never does, and says 4 words that stop the whole room. Ansel, the king's rooms. Not the corridor, not the pantry, not the grate tending and water carrying and standing in doorways that fills your normal days. The rooms. Somebody's beer mug clicks down on the table. The head laundress, Mrs. Chevely, crosses herself, quick and small, the way Catholics do when they don't want to be seen doing it. And this is how you learn that today is not going to be a normal day. You follow Mr. Brawn through the cold corridors, and I need you to understand what these corridors are, because this is not the Windsor of paintings. This is not gilt and crimson and chandeliers. The state apartments, the gorgeous rooms, the ones with the Van Dykes and the throne, those are shut up, sheeted, freezing, dead as a pharaoh's tomb. Nobody grand lives at Windsor anymore. The Regent prefers Carlton House and his seaside pleasure dome at Brighton, where the dinners run to 36 courses and the chandelier in the music room weighs a ton. What lives at Windsor is the secret. The thing the government spent 9 years managing. The way you manage a fire in a coal seam. Contained, watched, never discussed. The north side of the upper ward has been converted, that is the polite word, converted, into what everyone here calls the King's Apartments, and what a plainer man would call an asylum for one patient. 13 rooms, double doors with bays on the inner faces to swallow sound, locks on the outside, windows that open 8 inches and no further. A suite built for a majesty and refitted for a madman, and the terrible thing, the thing you thought about for weeks when you first came, is that it was done with love. Real care. The finest lunatic accommodation in the history of the world. Mr. Braun walks fast and talks quietly, not looking at you. Papendiek is sick. Fletcher's mother is dying at Datchet and he's been let go to her. God knows why today of all days. So it's you. You've done the night corridor. You know the rules, but I'll say them once more and you'll listen as if your life hangs on it, because it does. He stops at the foot of the last staircase. Above you, you can already hear it. Faint, through 2 closed doors, a sound you have heard 100 nights through the corridor wall, and which still lifts the hair on your arms. The king is singing. Rule 1, says Mr. Braun, you do not speak. Not to him, not near him, not at all unless Dr. Bailey or Sir Henry addresses you directly. He is stone deaf, but the doctors say voices trouble him. Vibrations, humours, I don't pretend to know. You are silent. Rule 2. You do not touch him unless a doctor or a senior page places your hand where it is to go. He cannot see a touch coming. Would you like to be seized in the dark by hands you never heard approach? No, neither does he. Neither does the King of England. Rule 3. And here Mr. Braun does look at you, and his face, which is usually the face of a man adding up laundry lists, is suddenly old. Whatever you see in these rooms, whatever you hear him say, and he says things, Ansel, he talks to persons who are not present. He says things about the family, about the dead. It did not happen. You will not repeat it in the hall. You will not repeat it in the town. You will not write it to your mother. Men have been turned out of this castle with no character for a sentence spoken in an alehouse. The king's madness belongs to the king. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. No, you don't, he says, without heat. But you will by tonight. And he opens the door. The first room is an anteroom, and it is warm. Warmer than anywhere you've been since summer. Warm like the inside of a loaf, because the king's rooms are the one place in the castle where coal is burned without counting, day and night, 2 fires per room, and stepping across that threshold is like stepping into another country. Your frozen face begins to ache and then to itch as the blood comes back into it. Sweat prickles under your arms before you've crossed the carpet. The smell is what you will remember for the rest of your life, and you might as well know it now. It is not filth. They keep him clean, cleaner than any man in England, washed and combed and shaved when safe by rotating shifts of hands. It is something underneath clean, warm flannel, chamomile, beef tea gone cold in a cup somewhere, candle wax, old man's skin which has a smell, dry and faintly sweet, like the pages of a book left in the sun, and threaded through all of it, faint but absolute. The smell you met for the first time this week and identified with your body before your mind caught up. The thin, grey, creeping smell of a human being beginning to leave. Nobody names it. Everybody breathes it. The second door is opened by a page called Bot, a heavy, kind-faced man of 50 who has served in these rooms for 11 years, since the madness became permanent, and who is said to be one of the only 4 servants the king's hands still recognise by touch. Bot looks at you, looks at Mr. Brawn, raises one eyebrow a quarter of an inch. This child receives some invisible answer and stands aside. And you are in the room, and there he is. You've seen the king before. Everyone in the castle has, in glimpses, a figure at a window, a shape in a wheeled chair on the terrace on warm days, flanked by pages, hair white in the wind. You have heard him through walls for 2 years, but you've never been in the room, and the first thing that hits you, stupidly embarrassingly, is he's small. He's sitting in a high-back chair near the fire in a dressing gown of purple silk quilted with wool, a shawl over his knees, and he is tiny. A bird's body, wrists like broom handles coming out of the vast sleeves, everything about him collapsed inward except his head, which is magnificent. The white hair long and combed back and falling to his shoulders. The beard, full and white, spreading over his chest because it has been years since anyone dared bring a razor near him daily, and it makes him look like nothing on any coin you've ever held. On the coins he is a Roman, cropped, laurelled, imperial. In the chair by the fire he is King Lear. He is God the Father on a church wall. He is any starved old man in any parish in England, waiting by any fire, except that this particular old man once ruled 1/3 of the earth, and lost the 1/3 that mattered most, and his blind eyes are open, pearl grey with cataract, aimed at nothing, and his mouth is moving. He is talking, quietly, rapidly, reasonably, in the tone of a man conducting business, with pauses for replies you cannot hear because they are not made. And Amelia shall have the garden at Frogmore. She was always fond. Yes, yes, but the Queen must not be told until— What? No, sir, no. America is an affair concluded. I will not hear it reopened. I bore that grief once and buried it. Amelia. You know that name. The whole kingdom knows it. His youngest daughter, his darling, dead of consumption in the year 1810 at 27, and it was her death, everyone says, that pushed him over the last edge into the dark for good. She has been dead for 10 years. He speaks to her every day. Bot will tell you this at noon, flat and quiet, the way men state the weather. He appoints her households. He plans her wedding. Some days he weeps at her funeral, and some days, the worst days, he tells the empty air quite calmly that his daughter Amelia is dead, you know, and then asks her what she thinks of that. Your job, Mr. Brawn murmurs at your ear, is the fire, the candles, the doors, and your own silence. You will fetch. You will carry. You will stand at the wall where Bot places you, and you will not exist. You take your place at the wall. The fire cracks and spits. The wind leans on the 8-inch window, and 3 feet away from you, the King of Great Britain and Ireland, defender of the faith, blind, deaf, mad and dying, laughs softly at something his dead daughter has said, and answers her, and you stand in the warm room in your buckled shoes, and understand all at once and forever why Mrs. Chevley crossed herself. Let me tell you how a morning works in these rooms, because it is a machine, and you are now a part of it, and the machine has been running for 9 years without one public word about what it does. At 7, the fires are dressed. That is you now. You kneel at the grate, the marble hearth, striking cold up through your breeches even in this warm room, and you work the poker into the banked coals slowly, slowly. because rule of the rooms, no sharp sounds, no clatter of iron on iron. You learn to lift each new coal with the tongs and place it, like a man laying bricks of glass, and the tongs are heavier than they look, and holding them out level makes a slow fire spread through your forearm, and by the third grate of the morning the muscle between your thumb and wrist is jumping on its own. Coal dust works into the cracks of your knuckles, into the split by your thumbnail, black lines mapping your hands, and it will not come fully out until Sunday, if then, at 7:30, the doctors. There are more doctors attached to this one dying man than to any town of 10,000 souls in England, and you will learn their boots before their faces, because your face is supposed to be aimed at the wall. Sir Henry Halford, quick boots, small feet, London leather, a man so smooth the other pages call him the eel in velvet, physician to the whole royal family, the man who will, within days, carry the news of this room to the new king. Dr. Matthew Bailey, heavier tread, Scottish, blunt, said to be the finest anatomist alive. He actually wrote the book, the first one in English, on morbid anatomy, on what disease does to the body's insides, and there is something in knowing that the man palpating the king's wrist has personally opened more human bodies than any man in Britain. And Dr. John Willis, son of the old mad doctor who broke the king's first madness back in 88 with straitjackets and blistering and the terrible chair, and whom the king, in his lucid years, hated with a whole and healthy hatred. The father is dead. The son attends. The king, who no longer knows his own reflection, is said to grow restless when Willis's hand touches him and no others, as if the skin remembers what the mind has lost. They gather at the bedside. Frere's moved to the bed after 8, 2 pages walking him the 11 steps, his feet in slippers shuffling hiss, hiss, hiss on the carpet, his weight nothing on their arms, nothing. Bott says he's under 7 stone now, a man who was 16 stone in his prime, a man built like his own plough horses who once walked farmers' fields at Kew and asked them about turnips and was mocked for it in every paper in London. Farmer George. They meant it as an insult. He took it as a coat of arms. The doctors do what doctors do at the end, which is very little, with great ceremony. The wrist is held, the watch is consulted, the eyelid is lifted with the thumb, and you see from your wall the pearl-grey eye beneath, unmoved, aimed at the ceiling, and you look away, and looking away feels both correct and cowardly at once. Pulse weak and irregular, says Bailey's voice. Some fever in the night, says Bott's. No nourishment taken, none since Thursday, and precious little for the 10 days before that. And then Sir Henry says the thing that doctors say, has said versions of every morning this week, in his beautiful drawing-room voice. His Majesty is sinking. He does not suffer. Nature is closing the scene with great gentleness. Nature is closing the scene. You will think about that sentence all day. It sounds like mercy. It is also, you understand, standing at your wall with coal dust in your cracked hands, the sentence of men who have run out of medicine and are dressing the running out in Latin manners. There is nothing in their bags for 81. There's nothing in anyone's bags for 81. All the power of the Crown, the College of Physicians, the whole learning of Europe, and the treatment for the death of a king is the same as the treatment for the death of your grandmother in her box bed in Abingdon. Wet the lips, keep the fire in, wait. At 9, the letter goes. This is a thing you did not know and would never have guessed. The king's condition is written down every single day. 1 paragraph, formal as a court circular and sent by rider to London, has been for years, and copies are posted publicly at St. James's, where crowds read them like weather reports. His Majesty passed a quiet night. His Majesty's disorder continues unabated. For 9 years the whole nation has been reading the fever chart of a man it will never see again, and this week the crowds at the notice have grown so thick, the papers say, that constables stand by to keep the street clear. You carry the sealed letter as far as the guard chamber and hand it to a groom whose horse is already breathing steam in the quadrangle. And for 1 minute, you are outside the warm rooms, in the freezing grey morning air of the upper ward, and the cold is a bucket of water and a blessing at once. The sky is low, the colour of wet slate. Ravens are walking on the frost-whitened grass with their hands behind their backs like little black bishops. From the town below the wall you can hear the 10 o'clock world. Cartwheels, a dog, a man crying coals, the ring of the blacksmith on Peascod Street, all of it thin and far and belonging to living people, and above it all the round tower stands up black against the slate sky, with the royal standard moving slow and heavy in the cold air. The standard, not the Union flag. The standard flies when the sovereign is in residence. It has flown over this tower, over that shuffling bird-boned man in the purple gown, every day for 9 years, and some child in Windsor town is 10 years old, and has never once seen the sky over the castle without it. Tomorrow, though you do not know it yet, standing there with your breath smoking, watching the groom clatter out through the Henry VIII gate, with the last daily bulletin that will ever be written. Tomorrow that flag comes down to half-mast, and the child will see it, and will remember it for 80 years, and will tell her grandchildren she was there the day old King George died, and they will be bored, and she will tell it anyway. But that is tomorrow. Bot is at the door behind you. The rooms want you back. You go back in. Out of the ringing cold, through the baize doors, into the warmth and the chamomile and the grey creeping smell, and the door shuts behind you with a sound like a held breath, and the world of the living clicks off like a snuffed candle. The king is asking the empty warm air whether it is not time for chapel. It is the first plainly sensible thing you have heard him say, and it is the one request in the world this whole machine of doctors and pages and riders and standards exists to refuse him. There will be no chapel. There will never be chapel again. And no one can even tell him why, because there is no way left into his head, not through the pearl eyes, not through the dead ears, no way in at all. And you stand at your wall and feel that fact close over the room like water over a stone. He waits for his answer, and then, getting none, he supplies it himself graciously, in the voice of a man excusing a beloved servant's lateness. Well, well, we shall pray here then. God hears Windsor as well as he hears the chapel. Eh? Eh. What? Eh. What? The old verbal tick half of England used to imitate, and the blind head bows, and the cracked lips move, and the King of England says his prayers to the God he never once, in 60 years of madness and grief and losing continence, stopped believing was listening. You look at the wall. The wall is safer. At 11, Bot teaches you the sponge. He does it wordlessly, the way everything is taught in these rooms. He takes your wrist in his big warm hand and moves it through the task, once, twice, and then watches you do it. The sponge is small, real sea sponge, softer than anything your hands have touched since you last touched a lamb. The cup holds water with a little chamomile and a little honey. You wet the sponge, you press it against the cup's rim until it stops dripping, until, this matters, A drop down a dying throat the wrong way brings coughing, and coughing at 7 stone is an event. Coughing shakes the whole scaffold of him. And then Bot places your hand, and you touch the sponge to the king's lower lip, and the king's mouth moves. That is the thing you were not ready for. The lips close on the sponge gently and pull at it, the way a baby pulls, the way lambs pulled at your fingers in the cold barns of your childhood, and act older than thought, the very first skill any of us ever has. And it turns out also the last, and the cracked lips work at the wet sponge and take perhaps half a spoonful of sweetened water, and something at the back of your eyes goes hot and dangerous, and you stare very hard at the sponge, at your own blackened, cracked knuckles against the white beard, and you make yourself into arithmetic. Press, count 3, turn, press, count 3, withdraw. His breath touches your hand. It is faint and quick, like a bird's, and smells of nothing at all any more. Bot told you once through the corridor wall on a night watch. At the end, even the breath gives up its smells. The body stops making its messes. It is tidying itself for the door. Enough, Bot murmurs, the word aimed at you, pitched below hearing, though nothing has been below this man's hearing for a decade. You withdraw the sponge. The lips go on moving a moment, seeking and then forget, and go back to their conversation. Told Herschel, I said, Sir, you shall have your 40-foot telescope and the money found. And the Queen laughed at me. 40 feet, she said. To look at what? And I said, Madam, at everything else. At everything that is not this. Eh? What? Herschel. You half know that name too. The music master from Hanover, who found a new planet from a back garden in Bath, found it in 1781, the first man in the history of mankind to enlarge the heavens, and he wanted to name it after this king. George's star. The astronomers on the continent wouldn't wear it. They called it Uranus instead. But the king gave him £200 a year, and 4,000 more for the great telescope at Slough. You can see the scaffold of it from the long walk on clear days, 6 miles off, like the skeleton of a siege engine. And the mad old man by the fire, this shrunken bird in purple, once stood inside that telescope tube before it was mounted, walked through it end to end with the Archbishop of Canterbury stumbling behind him, and called back down the echoing iron, Come, my Lord Bishop, I will show you the way to heaven. That happened. That is real. The same man, the same voice. This is the thing about these rooms that no one outside will ever get right, and the papers will get it wrong for 200 years. They will tell you the mad king, the tyrant of the American pamphlets, the man who lost the colonies, and all of it is true, and none of it is what is in this chair. What is in this chair is also the man who collected 13 children and 65,000 books. Who gave the books away in the end? A whole library, free, to any scholar who could use it. Who kept farm accounts under a false name in the agricultural journals, Ralph Robinson of Windsor, so he could publish his opinions on crop rotation without being laughed at, and was laughed at anyway. Who was the first King of England in 100 years to be faithful to his own wife, which the wits found funnier than the turnips? He asked one thing at his accession, one in his first speech from the throne, and he wrote the line in himself with his own pen. Born and educated in this country, I glory in the name of Britain. The grandson and great-grandson of Germans, the first of his line to speak English without an accent, wanting nothing in the world so much as to be liked by this cold, wet island. And the island, on the whole, did like him. That is the strange truth the Americans never believed. While their pamphlets were making him a monster, his own people were making him a mascot. Farmer George, the king who talked too fast and said, what? And walked to church at Windsor like a country squire with his enormous family straggling behind, and picnicked and bathed in the sea at Weymouth while a band hidden in the next bathing machine struck up God Save the King the instant his royal head went under the water, which is possibly the most English thing that has ever happened. They liked him even more after the madness came. That is the part that would puzzle a foreigner. The first bad spell, the winter of 88 into 89, when he foamed and raved and talked for 19 hours without stopping until his voice broke and his face turned purple, when they strapped him to the chair and blistered his shaved scalp to draw out the humours, when he once seized his son, the Prince of Wales, at dinner and slammed his head against a wall, when he came back from all that sane in the spring of 1789, the country went up like a bonfire. Lights in every window. 23 years before you were born, and men in your village still talked about it. And the sun, the fat, glittering sun who had spent his father's madness measuring the throne, had to stand in St. Paul's at the Thanksgiving and be publicly grateful for the recovery he had privately bet against. Then it came back. It always came back. In 1801, in 1804, and then in 1810, when Amelia lay dying at Windsor with her father sitting blind beside her bed. He was blind already by then. Cataracts, an old man's ordinary blindness laid on top of everything else. And she pressed into his hand a ring containing a lock of her hair, made specially so that he could know it by touch, since he would never see her face again. And inside the ring were engraved words he could not read, and had read to him, "Remember me." He never stopped. That is not a figure of speech. It is the plain clinical record of this room. The mind broke on that ring like a ship on a reef, and this time it did not float off. Parliament waited a year. You always wait a year. Madness had come and gone before. And then in 1811 they passed the Regency Act, and the fat son got the power at last, and the old king got the north side of Windsor and the door shut. 9 years. Think what 9 years is. In the world beyond the bay's doors, Napoleon burned Moscow and froze in the snow, and fell and came back and was broken for good at Waterloo. 5,000 of this king's own subjects dead in an afternoon in a Belgian field, and the man in whose name they charged knew nothing about it. Nobody told him. There was no way to tell him. The greatest war in the history of the world ended, and the King of England was never informed, and he sits by this fire on the far side of victory like a man left behind on a shore, still fighting on the days he fights at all, the wars of 40 years ago, still refusing, in a firm, reasonable voice, to grant independence to America, which, you realize, standing at your wall with the sponge drying in your hand, he never did grant in here. In this room, the 13 colonies are still in rebellion. In this room, Amelia is alive, and the Queen is alive. His Charlotte, dead these 14 months, and no one told him that either. There was a meeting about it, doctors and ministers, and they decided the news could not reach him, and would only harm him if it somehow did. In this room it is perpetually some year around 1783, the worst year, the year of the losing, which his broken mind circles back to the way your tongue circles back to a broken tooth. The fire needs coal. You kneel. You place each lump like glass. Hiss, settle, spark. The wind flattens itself against the 8 inches of open window, and far below and outside, in the living world, the blacksmith on Peascod Street is still ringing his anvil. Tink, 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 small as a toy. says the king softly, to no one, his blind face tilting. Eh? What? Who's there? And every man in the room stops breathing at once because that, Bot's eyes tell you across the carpet, that he has not asked in 4 years. Nobody answers. Nobody can. There's no way to answer him. That is the whole horror of the thing, and after a moment the blind face loses its tilt, and the question dissolves back into the murmur, and the room breathes again. But Bot's jaw is set wrong for the rest of the hour, and when the two of you are sent out at noon to eat, 20 minutes, in the page's pantry down the small stair, bread and cold mutton and beer, he sits across the little table from you, this heavy 50-year-old man with hands like a carpenter, and he doesn't eat. And then he says, not looking up, he felt you, this morning, with the sponge. You stopped chewing. He can't hear thunder, hasn't seen a candle flame in 8 years. But hands he knows. There's 4 of us he's calm for. Pappendiek, Fletcher, me and old Whiting that died at Michaelmas. New hands he fights, or he did when he had the fighting in him. You, he took the sponge from like a lamb. Bot turns his beer mug a quarter turn, a half turn. Your hands are cracked. Working hands, cold water hands. He looks up. So were the farmers. At Kew in the old days, he'd stop the whole riding party to talk to a hedger about his billhook, shake his hand, ministers waiting in the lane, and Majesty is asking a hedger how his wife does. I think, he stops, turning the mug. I think a farm hand is the last kind of hand he has any peace with, that's all. Eat your mutton. You eat your mutton. Your throat is having some difficulty which the mutton has to be forced past. 20 years I've been in this castle, Bot says to the mug. 11 in the rooms. My wife asks me of an evening what my day was. 20 years, and I have never once been able to tell her. He stands, brushes the crumbs off his black breeches with 2 hard strokes of his palm, and gives you the only smile you will get from him today. And it is not really a smile. You wanted to know why they pay us in silence as well as shillings. Now you know. Come on, doctors at 1. At 12:30, before the doctors return, Mr. Brawn sends you out of the castle entirely, and the errand is so ordinary it feels like a hallucination. The apothecary in the town has made up a fresh preparation for wetting His Majesty's lips. The chamomile and honey water, with third thing the doctors have added, orange flower or clary, written on a paper. And it must be fetched, and the grooms are all being saved for London riding, and you have legs. So you go out through the small postern by the 100 steps, and down, and the descent into Windsor town on the 29th of January, 1820, is a descent into another element, like a diver coming up. First the cold, the real outdoor cold after the hothouse of the rooms, hitting your sweated back like a plunge, making you gasp, and then, within 20 steps, making you gloriously, guiltily alive. Then the light, such as it is, low grey glare off the frost, hard on eyes tuned all morning to candle shadow. And then the noise, the blessed, stupid, living noise. Because the town does not stop for a dying king. The town cannot afford to. Peascod Street at midday is a shove of carts and servants and soldiers' wives. The gutters are frozen ridges of grey filth that you walk on top of rather than in, which is January's one gift. A brewer's dray is unloading at the Swan with the 2 horses steaming like kettles and the barrels booming down the ramp into the cellar. Boom! Boom! A sound you feel in your teeth. A fishwoman is crying place in a voice that could strip paint. 2 Eton boys in their black gowns. The college is just across the bridge. 500 sons of the great, ruled by flogging and Latin, are pelting a third with frozen horse dung, shrieking until a beadle scatters them. The blacksmith you've heard all morning as a toy tink at the window is here a great sweating reality in a leather apron, and the forge as you pass breathes on you a wall of heat and coal stink and scorched hoof, and the hammer up close is not tink but clang. A blow you flinch from, and the smith glances up mid-swing at your castle coat and gives you a nod. Everyone in this town reads livery the way clerks read hands, and the nod says what every face on the street says today. How is it up there? Is it soon? Is it now? Because they know. This is the thing you understand within 100 yards. The whole town is standing in the sick room too. It has been for 9 years. Windsor lives off the castle the way a mill town lives off its river. Victuallers, laundresses, saddlers, glaziers, half the parish in service or supplying it. But it is more than money, and today you can see that it is more. The talk in the bread queue is of the king. The barber's window has a print of him, the old print, the good one from before. Farmer George in his plain brown coat leaning on a fence at Kew, and someone has propped a sprig of evergreen against the frame. Outside the church, the sexton and 2 other men are standing looking up at the bell tower with their heads together, and you know exactly what they are discussing, and they know you know, and all 3 touch their hats to your coat with a terrible gentle deference, as if you were the ambassador of the thing itself. The apothecary's shop is on the high street, dim and warm and crowded floor to ceiling, with the smell of 100 wars between good and evil. Camphor and peppermint fighting the bitter earth smells of the roots and barks. Rows of gilt-labelled jars, senna, jalap, pulv, rye, a dried something hanging from a beam that you decide not to identify, and a pair of scales so fine they sit under a glass dome like a saint's relics. Mr. Yardley, the apothecary, is old, precise, and profoundly moved to be this week a supplier to history. He has your bottles ready, wrapped in straw, packed in a little wooden case, and he takes so long over the tying of the string that you understand the string is not the point. "You'll be one of the young men upstairs," he says at last, not looking up from the knot. "Yes, sir." A pause. The scales gleam under their dome. "I made up his cordials 30 years, you know, when he was himself. He'd have it noted on the paper, every time. Nothing dear, nothing foreign if English will serve. A king, mind you. Nothing dear." He pushes the case across the counter and then holds it 1 second longer than the handing over needs, so that the 2 of you are briefly holding it together, an old man and a boy connected by a box of chamomile water, and he says quietly, "Past the scales, past 30 years. You'll see he has it comfortable at the last. It is not a question, and you could lose your place for answering questions, and you answer it anyway, because Rule 3 was written by men, and this is older law. He's comfortable, sir. He doesn't suffer. The doctors say it every hour." Mr. Yardley nods and turns away quickly to rearrange jars that need no rearranging, and you take the case and go, and the bell over his door has been muffled. You notice on the way out, someone has wound a cloth round the clapper of a shop bell. Days early, just in case, so that not even a shop door will ring brightly in Windsor this week. You walk back up the hill with the case held against your chest like an infant. Below the bridge the Thames runs black between shelves of ice, and across it Eton's chapel stands over the bare trees, and behind you the town murmurs and cries its place and shoes its horses, and above you the castle waits on its rock with the standard, barely moving in the dead cold air, and for one moment, halfway up between the 2 worlds, you stop. You will not be able to explain ever why you stop. There is nothing to see that you have not seen 400 times. Grey river, grey town, grey sky, black birds. But something in you insists on standing still for the space of 10 breaths, with the medicine case against your chest. Some animal knowledge that days like this do not announce themselves twice, that you are, at this precise moment, a 19-year-old carrying the last physic of George III up Castle Hill, in the last hours of the last day of the longest reign in English history, and that the man you will be at 40 and 60 and 80 is standing here with you, all of them looking through your one pair of eyes, trying to fix it, all of it, the ice and the smoke and the weight of the case and the ache in your hands, because they know they will want it later. They will want every splinter of it. 10 breaths. Then the cold finds the gap between your collar and your neck like a pickpocket, and time starts again, and you climb. At the postern, the sentry, a boy your own age in a bearskin worth more than everything you own, his face grey-white with standing, stamps and lets you by and mutters through frozen lips, without moving his eyes from the middle distance, the question of the whole town, the whole country. Any change? Sinking, you say, the word the doctors use. It has climbed down the stairs and out of the castle and into everyone's mouth this week, and you hear how strange it is only now saying it into the open air, sinking, as if the king were a ship, as if somewhere above you a great vessel were going down slowly in clear water, all its lamps still lit. The sentry's jaw works once. God bless him then, he says, to the middle distance, to nobody, to the ship. And the small door in the great wall swallows you back in. The afternoon is the doctor's again, and this time there are more of them. Sir Henry has come back from London by 2 o'clock, which means London is worried, and with him a man you are told in a whisper is from the Privy Council, and behind him, moving like a warship among wherries, comes the Duke of York, Frederick, the King's second son, the soldier, the grand old Duke of York of the mocking song, who marched them up to the top of the hill and marched them down again, 60 years old now, vast, red-faced, wheezing from the stairs, wrapped in a travelling cloak with snow damp on the shoulders, and he is the only one of the 15 children the king fathered who has come, and you will learn tonight in the hall that he is the only one who regularly does, not the regent. The regent does not come. The regent has not seen his father in years and will not see him now, and men in the pantry say it without expression, which is how men in service say the loudest things. The Duke stands over the bed for a long time. He was the favourite son once, the army son, the one the old man was proudest of before the scandals, before the mistress who sold army commissions out of the Duke's own house, and made him the laughing-stock of 2 Houses of Parliament. Big, spoiled, kind-hearted, ruined Frederick. He takes off his glove. He puts his big hand around his father's bird-boned one, carefully, the way you would pick up a fallen nestling, and the king's fingers close on it, not knowing. The doctors are agreed that there is no knowing left. The pearl eyes do not turn. The murmur does not pause. The fingers close the way ivy closes, the way an infant's close, grip being the first thing and the last. But they close, and the Duke of York, Commander-in-Chief of the army of the greatest empire on earth, stands there held by one finger grip, his hat in his other hand, tears running openly down his big red face and off his jaw, plip, onto the travelling cloak, and nobody in the room looks at him, out of the only mercy anyone can offer, which is pretending not to see. You look at the wall. On the wall there is a small painting, and because you must look somewhere for the next half hour, you learn it entirely. A landscape, cornstalks, a harvest scene, a fat golden field under a Dutch sky. Somebody hung a harvest in the madman's bedroom. Farmer George. It is either the tenderest thing anyone ever did for him, or nobody thought about it at all, and you will never find out which. And somehow that is the most castle-like fact of the whole day. At 3, the Duke goes to write letters. At 4, the light, which never fully arrived, starts to go. The 9 candles are lit. You light them, the taper trembling very slightly, wax scent joining the room's grey ledger of smells. The wind has come up. It has weight to it now, leaning steady on the north face of the castle, hooting low over the chimney mouth so the fire breathes in gusts, brightening, dimming, like a thing sleeping badly. And the king begins, quite suddenly and quite clearly, to sing. You've heard him through walls. In the room it is different. The voice is a ruin, a thin, cracked, wandering thread, all the middle gone out of it. But the pitch, you realise with your skin, the pitch is true. He was musical his whole life, mad and sane. It was the last thing the doctors could reach him with in the bad years, and he would play the harpsichord in the dark, blind, for hours and weep at it. What he sings now, the thread of it rising and falling under the hoot of the wind, is Handel. Even you know it is Handel. Everyone in England knows this one. You have heard it bawled by 1,000 voices at fair time under a tent. Comfort ye, my people, from the Messiah, which, Bot will tell you this at the door tonight, in the voice of a man handing over something too heavy to keep holding alone. The king heard performed in the year 1785 at Westminster Abbey. 5,000 people, the biggest musical performance the world had ever seen, and wept at publicly, unashamed, a king crying in front of 5,000 subjects at the rising of the dead, and old Handel himself, mad blind at the end too, dictating music to an amanuensis when his eyes gave out. Handel had known this king as a fat little boy, had let the boy pump the organ bellows for him, and once said to the room in general of this same George, "While that boy lives, my music will never want a protector." And now the boy is 81, and blind as Handel and deaf as stone, and he is protecting the music with the very last of his voice, singing to a dead composer in an empty room he believes is full, comfort ye, my people, and he cannot hear himself. He has not heard his own voice in years. He sings entirely from the memory of what singing was, from the feel of it in the chest and the throat, a man signalling from inside a sealed vault that there is still someone in here, still someone, still. The thread phrase wanders, becomes murmur again, becomes, at last, only breath. Outside, full dark now. The blacksmith has stopped. Below the castle, the town of Windsor is lighting its windows one by one, and in every window the talk is the same talk, because the whole town lives off the castle, and the whole town knows. It's tonight or tomorrow, they're saying over the loaves and the beer. God bless him, the poor old gentleman, and men who were not born when he last waved from a coach are surprised to find their own eyes stinging, and don't mention it to each other. In the room, Sir Henry Halford takes the king's pulse for the 4th time in an hour, and this time he does not announce a number. He just looks across the bed at Bailey, one physician to another, the smallest look, and puts the wrist down as gently as porcelain, and you understand from your station at the wall that the vigil proper has begun. While the candles burn down toward the vigil, let me tell you who else kept this watch before you, because the room you are standing in has been the centre of a whole hidden world of watchers for 9 years, and most of them are gone now, and somebody should say their names. The Queen kept it first, Charlotte. 57 years married to him, the longest royal marriage England had ever seen. A plain, sharp, dutiful German girl who arrived at 17 speaking no English, married a stranger the day she met him, and grew into the one human being on earth he wholly trusted. When the first madness came in 88, it terrified her past recovery. There are servants still in this castle who remember the sounds of that winter, and remember that her hair went grey in a season, at 44, all of it. She was made his legal guardian when the last darkness fell, the wife, guardian of the husband by Act of Parliament. Think of that. And for 7 years she lived here at Windsor, mostly so as to be near a man who no longer knew her, and by the end she could hardly bear to go into the rooms, because he would speak of her, to her, tell the air fond and sometimes bitter things about Queen Charlotte, while Queen Charlotte stood 4 feet away, invisible, inaudible, erased, and there are limits to what even duty can watch. She died 14 months ago, in November of 1818 at Kew, sitting upright in a chair, holding the hand of the regent. Her last recorded thoughts were of what would become of the king. Nobody told him. There was a solemn meeting about it. Physicians, the archbishop, and the conclusion, written down, was that His Majesty's condition happily precluded the necessity of the communication. Happily. The word is in the minutes. So he outlived her without ever learning she was dead, and in this room she's still alive, and he still consults her, and sometimes quarrels with her. And once, Bott told you this at the pantry table, and his voice did not change but his hands went still. Once, last spring, he was heard to tell the empty chair by the window, gently, that she should not sit up so late on his account, that he was old now and poor company, and that she had been, taken all in all, the best wife any man in England ever had. Eh? What? 14 months after her funeral, to her empty chair, then the daughters, the princesses, 6 of them lived to grow up, and their father loved them with a jealous, smothering, catastrophic love, could not bear to part with them, wrecked or delayed every marriage, kept them into their 30s and 40s in what they themselves, in their letters, called the nunnery. Windsor and Kew, needlework and terrace walks and their mother's temper, the most gilded imprisonment in Europe. They paid for his love with their lives' shape, and here is the unbearable arithmetic of it. They loved him back, completely. Sophia, who almost never leaves Windsor even now, Augusta, Elizabeth, who finally escaped into marriage at 47, the year her mother died, and Mary who married at 40, who still comes over from her house to ask the doctors questions they cannot answer. In the early years of the confinement, the sisters would be brought to the rooms on his calm days, and he knew their hands. Hands again, always hands, the last door into him, and they would sit with him while he played the harpsichord, blind, and sang, and the equerries outside the door could not always tell, they admitted in the hall, which of the voices within were singing and which were weeping, and Amelia keeps this watch from the other side. She is in every day of it. The ring with her hair is on his little finger tonight, has never once been off it in 10 years. The pages who dress him work around it the way masons work round a saint's bone in a wall. Remember me. He's the only mourner in history, someone in the hall once said, whose mourning never had to end because he never learned it should. His daughter dies for him afresh some days, and is planning her garden at Frogmore on others, and on the best days. You heard one this morning. She is simply there, and adored, and the terrible truth that the doctors will not put in any bulletin is that the maddest hours of the King of England are also his happiest. Then the watchers of the household. Old Whiting, page of the backstairs, 40 years' service, who died at his post in all but name at Michaelmas, and was buried in Windsor churchyard with... This was noticed. A wreath sent down from the rooms in somebody's name. Nobody would say whose. General Taylor, who was secretary to the blind king in the last sane years, and devised for him a whole method of signing state papers by guiding his hand, and read him his letters twice over because the king insisted on hearing petitions from ordinary people first. The physicians in their relays, 7 years of them, one of whom, Dr. John Willis, whose father broke the first madness with the chair and the blisters. The king in his sane years so hated that he made ministers promise formally that no Willis would ever attend him again. The promise was given. He is upstairs now. He has been for years. There was no one else with the experience, and the king would never know. Every man who gave that promise found a reason, and perhaps the reasons were even good, and you have learned enough in one day to know you will not judge them, and to know also that somewhere in that broken promise is the whole story of what it is to be a king. Even your hatreds are overruled at the end by the requirements of your body's management. And the last watcher is the strangest of all, and it is the country itself. Because for 9 years, out beyond the bay's doors, Britain has been living through the harshest passage in its modern history. The war ending, the peace failing, bread at famine prices, frames smashed in the Midlands, the yeomanry's sabres at Peterloo, treason trials, the Cato Street men plotting this very winter, this very month, to murder the whole cabinet at dinner, a country grinding against itself like ice floes, and through all of it, standing entirely outside it, unaware of it, the old king has served his people one final office that nobody designed and nobody names. He has been the one man in public life it is impossible to be angry at. The radicals rage at his son, at the ministers, at the crown as a thing, but the person, the blind old person at Windsor, has passed beyond politics into something more like weather or scripture. His goodness is agreed on by men who agree on nothing else. The most seditious print shop in London sells his portrait without irony. He has become, precisely by being absent, silent, suffering, and harmless, the last thing everyone in a furious kingdom still has in common. Tomorrow that office ends too. Tomorrow the kingdom must get along without its one point of agreement, and it does not know yet how much work the silent old man was doing, and it will find out, and part of the enormous grief that is about to break over England, the black cloth, the 60,000 bells, will be the country mourning, without knowing it, the loss of its own last innocence about itself. But that is tomorrow's weight, and tomorrow can carry it. Tonight there is only the room, and the 9 candles, and the small breathing, and you. The wind hoots on the chimney. The fire wants coal. You kneel and lay it in like glass. Here is what a royal death watch actually is, hour by hour, because no engraving will ever show it, and the court circular will boil it down to 11 words. It is standing. Mostly it is standing. You stand at your wall from 5 until 8, and the standing becomes its own country of small pains. The arches of your feet first, then a hot wire up the backs of your calves, then the low back, until you learn what every soldier and every footman learns, the secret slow shifting of weight, ounce by ounce, heel to heel, that keeps a man upright for hours and looks, from 6 feet away, like perfect stillness. It is the fire, every 40 minutes, glass-laid coals, the tongs heavier each time, your right forearm one long dull ache now, the split at your thumbnail packed black. It is thirst. Nobody thinks of the watchers. Your tongue sticks lightly to the roof of your mouth for 2 hours until Bot, who thinks of everything, walks past you on some errand and presses a cold orange into your hand. An orange in January, worth a shilling if it's worth a farthing, off the doctor's own tray, and you eat it in the candle shadow behind the door in 6 fast animal bites, and the smell of it cuts through the room's grey smell like a knife through smoke, and the sharp juice stings the crack at your thumb, and it is somehow the single best thing you have ever eaten in your life. You will remember that orange at 80. You will not be able to smell an orange again, ever, without this room assembling itself around you. It is sound. The room at night is a clock of sounds, and you learn to tell time by them. The wind, steady, hooting on the chimney, the fire's soft collapses. The scratch of the equerry's pen in the anteroom, writing the letters that grooms carry off into the dark at a gallop. London, Brighton, Kew. Hooves on frozen gravel dying away twice an hour. The Duke's tread back and forth in the long room next door. 21 strides. Turn. 21 strides. A soldier's pacing half the night. And the breathing. By 9 the breathing has changed, and every person in the room knows the new sound, because every person in the room, however grand, has sat up with some dying person somewhere. A mother, a messmate, a wife. This is 1820. Everyone has. Death is not a specialist subject yet. And the sound it makes is this. A long, faint, dry pull inward, like a distant tide over shingle. A pause. Too long a pause you fall into, all of you together, 7 men leaning by a 1/4 inch toward the bed, and then the small dry falling tide out, and again, and each pause a coin spun in the air. Sir Henry calls it quietly to the Privy Council man by its medical name, and the Latin of it is somehow worse than the sound. It is also, and this nobody warns you about, boredom. Real boredom, marbled right through the terror and the pity, hour on hour of it, so that your mind, ashamed of itself, wanders to Joseph grinding his teeth in the attic, to whether the groom took the 2nd letter or the 3rd, to the harvest painting, to your mother in Abingdon, who by rights should get a letter from you this month. And what could it possibly say? Mr. Brawn was right this morning. You understand Rule 3 now. It isn't secrecy for shame. It's that there are no words sized for this that wouldn't be either treason or scripture. At 10, they changed the sheets under him without moving him more than inches. 4 pages, Bot commanding by finger signs. A manoeuvre as practised as gunnery, roll, draw, smooth, roll back, and the king rides the moving linen light as a sheaf of straw, murmuring, unalarmed. His hand, when it settles again on the counterpane, settles palm up, open, as if waiting to be given something, or to give something up. At 11 the chaplain comes in and reads, in a low voice, to a man who cannot hear one syllable, the prayers for the visitation of the sick, and this no longer strikes you as absurd, and the moment it stops striking you as absurd is the moment you understand what a deathbed is for. None of this. The sponge, the singing, the Duke's held finger, the prayers into deaf ears. None of it can reach him. It was never going to reach him. It is not for him. or not only, it is the living saying to the dying, "You did not become nothing to us while you were still here. We kept the forms, we kept the watch. The country kept it too, in its way, all these 9 years. That is the strange thing you keep circling as you stand. They could have unkinged him. There were lawyers enough. Instead, the whole empire agreed to a kind of fiction and a kind of faith. The coins went on carrying his face, older and older. The armies charged in his name. The prayers in 10,000 parish churches every Sunday named him first, our most gracious sovereign lord King George, and everyone kneeling knew the sovereign lord was a blind old man talking to his dead daughter behind a baize door in Berkshire, and they prayed it anyway, and meant it. A whole nation holding the hand of someone who could not feel it. Practicing, though nobody said so, for what every family does at every bedside like this one, staying when staying is all that's left. Just before midnight, the wind drops. It has leaned on the castle all day and half the night, and now inside 1 minute it stops, the way a crying child stops, and the silence it leaves behind is enormous. The fire straightens, the candles stand up, and in the new stillness the room hears how faint the breathing has become, the tide going out over shingle further and further away, as if the sea itself were being carried off over the horizon. The Duke comes in from the long room and does not go out again. The doctors stand. Bot moves you, one hand on your shoulder from your wall to the foot of the bed. Later you will understand this was a gift, the greatest of Bot's whole silent vocabulary. He wanted the farmhands nearby at the end. And so you're standing at the foot of the bed of George III, by the grace of God, King of Great Britain and Ireland, at midnight on the morning of the 30th of January 1820, when the murmuring which has run like water under all these hours, under 9 years, under everything, finally goes quiet, not the breath, the murmur, the conversation ends first. Whatever company he kept in the dark, Amelia, the Queen, Handel, Herschel, the Hedges of Kew, the Lost Americans, the talk with them is finished. The blind face on the pillow is still, and for the first time all day it does not look mad. It looks like what it is. The face on the coins come home from a long war. The breathing goes on alone for a while, smaller and smaller, tied over shingle further and further. Sir Henry has the wrist. The room is 9 candles, 7 men, one duke on his knees now at the bedside with his father's hand in both of his, and outside the whole sleeping weight of the castle, and below it the sleeping town, and beyond that the sleeping, hungry, angry, exhausted kingdom that this man was given at 22 and told to love, and did love, clumsily and stubbornly and completely for 59 years, longer than anyone had ever loved it from a throne before. At 32 minutes past 8 the following evening, no, stop. That is what the histories will muddle. Let it be told as it happened, as you will tell it once, decades from now, to one person only. The last day dawns, and he is still there, past all the doctor's arithmetic, the stubbornness holding one more turn of the light, Farmer George seeing one more morning in over the fields he cannot see, and all through that Sunday the castle moves on tiptoe, and the bulletins stop because there is nothing left to bulletin, and the town below waits with its bells muffled and ready. And at 8 o'clock on that Sunday evening, the 29th day of January, with the Duke of York holding his hand and no struggle in him anywhere, in the words Sir Henry will write to London within the hour, without a groan or even a sigh, The tide goes out over the shingle and does not come back in. You're looking at his open hand when it happens. You will always be glad it was the hand. For a moment, nobody moves. The fire ticks. Candle flutters and rights itself. Then Sir Henry Halford lays the royal wrist down on the counterpane for the last time, straightens and says to the Duke, the sentence that ends one world and starts another, the sentence that has been said this same way in rooms like this for 700 years. It is over, sir. The king is at peace. And the Duke of York, kneeling by the bed, 60 years old, presses his father's hand against his own forehead and holds it there. And in the anteroom the equerry's pen begins to scratch. Fast, because a groom is already pulling on his boots, because 11 miles of frozen dark stand between this room and the fat weeping man at Carlton House, who has, in this exact silence, without feeling anything at all, become King George IV. The reign is over. It began before Mozart wrote a note in public. It outlasted Napoleon's whole career, beginning to end, with years to spare on either side. It lost one empire in the west and gained a larger one in the east, and the man at the centre of it spent its final decade in this one warm suite of rooms, unaware that it was continuing at all. 59 years, 3 months, and 4 days. Nobody has ever reigned England longer. His granddaughter will. She is 8 months old tonight, asleep in Kensington Palace, and her name is Victoria. What happens in the first hour after a king dies is this: nothing, and then everything. The nothing first. For perhaps 10 minutes the room is only a room with a dead old man in it, and the men in it are only men. The Duke stays on his knees. Bailey closes the pearl eyes with 2 fingers and holds them a moment, the way you'd hold a door against a draught. Somebody, you never see who, stops the clock on the mantel, an old custom, older than anyone knows the reason for, and the small brass tick that you had stopped hearing hours ago becomes deafening by its absence. Bott opens the window its full 8 inches, and the January air comes in like clear water into a stale pool, and that is a custom too, the oldest one of all. You open the window to let the soul out. A room in the smallest cottage in Abingdon, and a room in Windsor Castle, and at this 1 hour they follow exactly the same law. You stand at the foot of the bed with your ruined hands folded, and you look at him, because now you are allowed to look, and the strangest thought of your whole strange day arrives and refuses to leave. He is the freest man in England. Think what has just fallen off him. The blindness, gone. The deafness, gone. The 9 years of talking into the dark, over. The chair with the straps that he called his coronation chair. The blisters, the leeches, the bulletins posted at St. James's for strangers to read, the sons who did not come, the daughter's ring that broke his mind, the 13 colonies that he carried like a stone in the chest for 40 years. All of it, set down at once, at 8 o'clock on a Sunday evening, without a groan or even a sigh. Blind, deaf, mad, caged, and now none of those things forever. If the chaplain is right, and the king never once doubted the chaplain's book, not through any of it, then at this moment he can see Amelia, and hear Handel, and the field of stooked corn goes on to the horizon. You are 19. You do not know yet what you believe, but you know that every man in this room is standing straighter than grief alone would ask, and that the feeling loose in the warm air, moving among the 9 candles, is not only sorrow, it is release. His, and say it. It is only yourself you're saying it to. Everyone's. Then the everything begins. boots on stairs. Doors. The castle, waking room by room like a ship beaten to quarters, lights kindling along the whole north range. The groom goes out through the Henry VIII gate at a flat gallop, sparks off the frozen cobbles, carrying 11 words to London, and behind him a second rider, and a third, for the Archbishop, for the Prime Minister, for the brothers and sisters scattered from Brighton to Hanover. In the town below, the watchman at the bridge sees the castle lighting up window by window at 8:30 on a Sunday night, and knows, and tells the toll-keeper, and the toll-keeper's wife tells the Swan. And by 9 o'clock the whole of Windsor is standing in its doorways in the freezing dark looking up at the lit castle, and nobody is saying very much. At 9:15, the great bell of St.George's Chapel begins to toll. You hear it from inside the rooms, through stone 11 feet thick, a bronze pulse more felt than heard, once every minute, and it will not stop. 1 stroke a minute, all night, and the parish churches take it up. Windsor, Eton across the river, Datchet, Clewer, spreading outward, parish by parish, through the dark like rings on black water, so that a carter on the Bath Road 10 miles off hears village after village begin to toll as he passes, and knows what has happened without meeting a living soul. By morning it will be tolling in Bristol and York. By Tuesday, when the packet boats get in Dublin, 60,000 church bells, one man. And in the villages they do the old count that everyone's grandmother knows. The teller strokes. 3 times 3 for a man, then 1 stroke for every year of the life. And the sextons of England, hauling on frozen ropes in the dark, count out 81 separate strokes, a long time, arms burning, and the listeners in the cottages counting silently along past 40, past 60, past 70, thinking he was on the throne before my father was born. And when the count passes 80, there is only one man in the kingdom it can be, and the kettle is put on, and the talk begins, and somewhere in every parish in England tonight, an old woman says the same words. I remember when he was crowned, 60 years. She was a girl. She is a great-grandmother. Inside the rooms the work is quieter. The doctors withdraw to write. The Duke is led away at last by his own equerry, walking like a man on a ship's deck. And the laying out, and this you had not expected, though you should have. The laying out falls to the pages, to Bott, and to Papendiek, dragged sick from his bed because he has earned the right, and to 2 others of the old hands, and to you. Bott looks at you across the bed, and doesn't ask with words, and you do not answer with words. You stay. Warm water, clean linen. You've done this before. Every farm child has, a grandmother, an infant sister, and the body of a king is a body, lighter than the linen sheets seem to expect, the skin loose over the long bones like a glove 2 sizes too large. The hands, you wash the hands still faintly curled toward holding. You work in silence. 4 men and a basin, steam rising in the candlelight, and it is the gentlest hour of your entire life, and the most secret. And Mr. Brawn's rule 3 sits over it like a seal on wax. The white hair is combed. The beard, which no razor will trouble now, is combed. On the left little finger there is a ring, and you do not need to be told which ring it is, and it is not removed. Toward 2 in the morning it is done, and the King of England lies clean and straight in fresh linen with candles at his head and feet, and Bott sends the others out and stands a moment at the door, looking back into the room, 11 years of his life lying still under the harvest painting. "Go up and sleep, lad," he says. His voice is sandpaper. "You did well. You did." He does not finish. He puts his big carpenter's hand on your shoulder for 1 second, the way he placed it there at the foot of the bed, and then he goes to sit the first watch alone, because the body of a king is never left alone from the moment of death to the moment the vault closes, and Bott has decided, without consulting anybody, that the first watch belongs to him. You climb the 42 steps in the dark. The attic is ice. Joseph is awake, sitting up in his blanket, eyes enormous. Is it true? Yes. A long pause. The bell tolls once felt through the stone. What was it like? He whispers. In there. All this time. What was he like? And you open your mouth, and Rule 3 closes it, and something else closes it too. Something that is your own now, paid for, not the castle's. And you say the only sentence you will ever say about this night, the sentence you will still be saying at 80. He was singing some of the time. He sang true. You lie down in your clothes. Through the floor, through the stone, once a minute the bell. You are asleep before you decide to be. The morning after, you learn what the machinery of monarchy actually is, because you watch it perform its oldest trick, the trick of never stopping. You wake. You're astonished to have slept, ashamed of it, then too young to stay ashamed, to a castle that sounds wrong, and it takes you a moment lying in the freezing attic dark to name it. The bell. Still tolling once a minute all through the night, and it has stopped being a sound and become a condition, like a pulse, like the castle itself keeping the count. Joseph is gone already. Your coat, when you take it up, has a band of black crape basted round the left sleeve, sewn in the night by hands unknown, and so as every coat in the household, and you never find out who sat up sewing 60 armbands by rushlight, though you could guess, and the guess involves the linen room and a woman who ironed his shirts for 40 years and needed that night something to do with her hands. In London, you learn later, the machinery had already turned before midnight. The rider made Carlton House by 11, and the fat son, sick in bed himself with an inflammation of the lungs so severe his own doctors were bleeding him. There was real talk that week that the new reign might be measured in days, that England might crown and bury 2 kings in one season. The fat, sick son wept, genuinely, the way he did everything hugely, and was king before he had stopped. The Privy Council met the next day around his bed, quills scratching and the wheels engaged, and by Monday afternoon it reached Windsor as it reached every market town in the land, the proclamation. You stand in the crowd for it, in the black-draped town, packed into the space by the Guildhall where the corn dealers usually shout. The mayor and corporation in their robes, half of them audibly coughing from cold or from crying, and a herald sent down specially, gorgeous and freezing in his gold-stitched tabard, and the garrison drawn up with arms reversed, muzzles to the ground, the mourning of soldiers, a trumpet shocking after a night and a day of muffled bells, one high silver tear in the grey air, and then the ancient sentence, read loud off vellum to the crowded street, the sentence that does the impossible thing, that carries the whole kingdom over the crack in the world in a single breath, whereas it hath pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late sovereign lord King George III, of blessed and glorious memory. Blessed and glorious memory already, 18 hours dead and already memory already marble, by whose decease the imperial crown is solely and rightfully come to his Royal Highness George, Prince of Wales. And then the words, The two words the herald must say and the crowd must answer, the words that were spoken in this same street for the dead man himself on a wet October day in 1760, 60 years ago, when he was 22 and terrified, and wrote in his diary that he felt the weight come onto him like a physical thing. God save the king. And the crowd of Windsor, grieving, black-banded, many of them in tears at that very moment for the old man on the hill, the crowd roars it back. God save the king. 3 times, as custom demands, and the trumpet again, and caps in the air, some of them. And this is the thing you stand there understanding with your whole body. 19 years old with crape on your sleeve. Both things at once. That is the trick. That is the whole secret of the ancient machine. Grief on the left hand, allegiance on the right, and no gap between them into which the country could fall. The king is dead. God save the king. The bell tolling for the father and the trumpet sounding for the son within the same minute, in the same street from the same lungs. And nobody feels false, because it is not false. It is the oldest promise the tribe knows how to make. Older than the castle, older than the crown itself. Someone will always be keeping the watch. The fire will not be let go out. You walk back up the hill behind the dispersing crowd. On the way you pass the print shop, and the window has changed overnight. The old portraits of the young king brought out of stock, Farmer George at his fence, the coronation head of 1761, and propped in the centre a broadside so new the ink is barely dry, with a black border an inch thick, and a woodcut of Britannia weeping on an urn, and beneath it, in letters you can read from across the street, the dead man's whole life squeezed into the only line the printer had type big enough for. The good old king, 4 words, 59 years. America, Napoleon, 13 children, 2 lost decades of darkness, the harvest painting, the ring, the sponge, the singing, all of it, folded down and down like a letter until it fits into 4 words a carter can read at a trot. That is what history will do to him, you think. That is what history does to everyone it keeps at all. And the ones it doesn't keep, Bott, Whiting, Mrs. Chevley, the sexton counting 81 in the frozen dark you. History doesn't even fold. It just lets the snow fall on the whole enormous night of you, as if you had never held the candle. Standing in the cold street with your cracked hands in your armpits, you decide you do not mind. You are surprised to find you mean it. The broadside is for the world. The room was for him. And what happened in the room does not need the printer, because it is written where such things are kept, in the hands. In Bott's hands and Mary's hands and the Duke's big-held hand and your hands, which will remember the weight of the tongs and the pull of lips on a sponge for 60 more years, and pass the knowing of it into everything else they ever touch, every child's face, every latch, every other fire laid quietly so as not to wake someone. That is the other ledger. Nothing in it is ever abridged. The standard is at half-mast above the round tower, huge and heavy and hardly moving. You stand a last moment looking up at it. Then you go in through the small door because the fires want laying, and the living are cold, and the work of the house, which is the work of the world, does not stop for anything, and was never meant to, and that you have decided by the time your knee touches the first hearthstone, that is not the sad part. That is the mercy. The days that follow are like no days you have known, and the first strange thing about them is the clothes. The whole country goes black, not poetically, literally by proclamation and by custom general mourning. Every person who can afford it puts on black, and every person who cannot puts on a black armband or a black ribbon, and within 1 week the drapers of England have sold out of black cloth entirely, warehouses stripped, and the price of black crepe triples, and there are fistfights in Cheapside over bolts of bombazine. Whole trades turn on it. The ribbon weavers of Coventry, who make coloured silks, are ruined for a season. The crepe makers of Norwich work night shifts by lamplight and make fortunes. A king's death moves through the economy like weather. Theatres shut, the law courts shut. The shops of Windsor put up their shutters with black bows on the shutter hinges, and the Swan drapes its signboard, and even the blacksmith on Peascod Street ties black cloth around his anvil, which serves no purpose at all, and is therefore, you're beginning to understand exactly the point. The second strange thing is that grief, real grief, is everywhere and nowhere. The men in the servants' hall talk about the funeral arrangements, the fees, the black cloth allowance. Every royal servant is owed mourning clothes by right, and Mr. Braun spends 3 days in a storm of tailors, and nobody says I am sorry he is dead. And then you come upon Mrs. Shively, the head laundress, iron-faced ruler of 30 maids, alone in the linen room at mid-morning, sitting on a stool with a pressed shirt in her lap, not moving, and her face when she turns it to you is wet and old, and she says, as if answering a question, I ironed for him 40 years when he knew his shirts. He liked them plain. No man in England liked things plainer. And then savagely, well, have you no work? You have work. You go to it. And the third strange thing is the news that arrives from Kensington, and it silences even the servants' hall. 6 days before the king died, 6 days, his 4th son died too. The Duke of Kent, big healthy soldier of 52, caught a chill at Sidmouth by the sea, sat too long in wet boots, and was dead of the lung fever inside a fortnight on the 23rd of January. Father and son, out of the world in 1 week. And the Duke of Kent leaves behind a widow who barely speaks English, and 1 baby daughter, 8 months old, and that baby, men count it on their fingers in the hall, uncles, heirs, childless, childless, childless. That baby is now 3rd in line to the throne of England. Victoria. Nobody can quite pronounce it. It will not matter. The whole world is going to learn. For 17 days the dead king lies at Windsor while England argues about him in print, and you read the arguments. The pages take the papers up from the hall, and it is like reading about several different men. The radical papers are cold. The reign of corruption, America, the wars, 600 millions of debt, Peterloo done in his name if not by his hand. The loyal papers canonize him, the father of his people, the good old king, the pattern of private virtue. And in between, in the letters and the sermons and the talk of the town, something truer and stranger surfaces, something you recognize because you were in the room. England is not mourning a statesman. England barely remembers the statesman. England is mourning the blind old man at the window, the one it prayed for by name every Sunday for 9 years, the one whose bulletins it read at St. James's Gate in the rain. It is mourning, in the enormous public way of nations, the private thing, a grandfather, kept upstairs, gone at last. Half the tears in England that fortnight are for other bedsides entirely, and every sexton knows it and rings anyway. On the 15th of February they bring him down. The lying in state is held in the Dean's rooms by St. George's Chapel, and Windsor becomes something you have never seen. Full. The town of 3,000 swells past 30. Every bed within 7 miles is sold, then every stable loft, then standing room by kitchen fires at £1 a night. Mail coaches coming from London packed inside and out, passengers riding the roof in the black wind. From the castle walls you look down on the Thames Valley, and the roads are black threads of moving people. From Staines, from Reading, from London on foot, thousands upon thousands, wrapped and hatted, streaming toward the hill and the grey towers, and through the state-rooms they file for 2 days, hour after hour, past the coffin with its crimson pall and the crown lying on it, shuffling, hats off, utterly quiet. The same species of quiet you learned in the sick-room, the quiet of people keeping a form because the form is all that can be kept. And then the 16th of February, the funeral, and the funeral you will remember with your body, because the funeral nearly kills half the aristocracy of England, and this is not a figure of speech, it is held at night. Royal funerals are, by ancient custom, by torchlight, and the 16th of February 1820 is one of the coldest nights of a brutal winter. Iron frost, the ground ringing underfoot like a bell, breath freezing in beards, and custom, blind pitiless custom, requires the procession to walk. Peers, ministers, household, all of them, bareheaded or near it, in cloth cloaks, at a dead slow march through the freezing outdoor dark from the castle to the chapel, behind the coffin, while minute guns fire from the long walk. Boom! A long minute of black silence. Boom! And the muffled bells toll overhead, and thousands of torches turn the whole hill into a river of smoking orange light seen 20 miles off. You are in it. Every servant of the household walks, black-cloaked 2 by 2. The cold comes up through your shoe soles inside 100 yards, and after that your feet are wooden blocks you're balancing on. The torch you carry streams sideways in the wind and gutters and drips burning pitch that hisses on the frozen ground, and its heat scorches one side of your face while the other side goes dead numb, and the smoke is in your throat, and ahead of you the coffin sways on the shoulders of the yeoman, gleaming, and behind you an Earl of 70 is coughing and coughing and coughing. Remember that cough. Within the month, England will count what this night cost. The Duke of Montrose deathly ill, half the cabinet in bed, and men actually dead of it, dead of a funeral. Among them, the papers will say, the Bishop of London's own physician, and Mr. Canning's friend, the member for Liverpool. There are men walking bareheaded in this procession tonight who have, by walking, ended their own stories. The old king who caught his death of nothing at all, who simply wore out like a psalm, is carried to his vault through a night so cold it reaps the mourners around him like a last levy. Even his funeral, men will say in the hall afterward, even his funeral took its people with it, like a pharaoh's. Inside the chapel, candlelight on stone going up and up into blackness, the choir's breath smoking as they sing, the whole peerage of England shuddering in its robes. The service is long, the anthem is Handel, of course it is Handel. And when the singing dies, the coffin sinks, slowly on machinery you cannot see through the floor of the choir, down into the new royal vault that the king himself ordered built 10 years ago, down to where Amelia has been waiting since 1810, and Charlotte, his queen, since 1818. The wife and the daughter he never knew were dead, and the Garter King of Arms steps forward over the open dark and proclaims, in a voice that fills the stone, the style and titles, all of them, the whole enormous sentence of what this small blind man was, King of Great Britain and Ireland, defender of the faith, King of Hanover, and ends it, as it has been ended over this vault stone for centuries, with the words that shut one book and open the next. God save the King, meaning the other one now, meaning the fat weeping son in London who didn't walk tonight. The minute guns stop, the bells stop, 60 years stop. And you walk back up the frozen hill in the crowd of black cloaks, boots ringing on iron ground, torches going out one by one around you, and above the round tower, for the first time in your 2 years at Windsor, the great flagstaff stands empty against the stars, bare as a winter tree, and the sky over the castle looks naked and enormous and new. After the funeral, the rooms are dismantled, and this is the part nobody thinks about, and it takes weeks, and it falls, as everything falls, to the servants. The baize comes off the doors. You help pry the tacks, one by one, kneeling in the cold. The fire's not lit anymore. The coal allowance died with the king, and the warm country beyond the double doors is gone as if it never was. The rooms reverting in a fortnight to the same stone chill as the rest of the castle, as if the warmth had been his personally and left with him. The locks come off the outer faces. The 8-inch window stops are unscrewed, and the windows open wide for the first time in 9 years, and March air moves through the king's apartments, and the smell, the flannel, the chamomile, the grey, creeping smell you will carry in your nose to your grave, thins day by day, and one morning in April you walk through with an inventory list, and it is simply gone, and the rooms smell of nothing, of stone, of any rooms, and you stand there a moment with the list in your hand, feeling something you have no word for. The harpsichord goes to storage, wrapped in sacking, roped like furniture, which is what it is now. The harvest painting comes down. You never do find out who hung it. The inventory is your work for a month, Ewan Bott. Every shirt, every book he could not read, every cup. In a drawer of the night table you find a small parcel of letters tied in ribbon, 40 and 50 years old, in a woman's hand, and Bott takes them from you without a word and carries them to the dean, and you do not ask. And that evening Bott stands you a pot of ale at the 2 brewers in the town and says nothing for half an hour, and then talks for 2 hours straight. Kew in the 70s, the terrace at Windsor with all 15 children walking out in a line like a fleet in sail, the bathing at Weymouth, the night in 88 when the madness first showed at dinner and nobody at table dared move. The whole hoarded, forbidden treasury of it, spilled at last to the one person left who was in the room at the end and therefore inside the seal. Rule 3 holds between the two of you like a shared house. He talks, you listen. It is understood that this is the only night it will ever be spoken of, and it is. The household is broken up in the spring. The new king has no use for Windsor yet. He will have in a few years. He will pour a fortune into it. Towers and battlements. Half the castle you'd know today is his invention. But for now the establishment is cut to a caretaker's staff, and the pages and grooms of a dead king scatter for places like leaves. Papendick retires on his pension. Joseph goes to a lord's house in Wiltshire. Bott, 11 years in the rooms, is offered a place in the new king's household at Brighton among the gilt and the chandeliers, and refuses it, to everyone's astonishment but yours, and takes instead the lease of a small farm near Dorney, which he can afford because pages of the back stairs are paid better than anyone admits, and the last you see of him for years is a heavy man in a cart with his wife beside him, going down the castle hill in the rain, not looking back. You are kept on, youngest and cheapest. That is the arithmetic, and you know it, and you stay anyway, because the castle has become the thing that happens to places where your life's one great event occurred. It has become yours, and the years do what years do. You rise, under porter, then By the time the new king finally comes to Windsor with his architects and his scaffolding and his debts, a junior clerk of the works, because you can read and figure and keep your mouth shut, and the last of these is the rarest qualification in England. You watch them raise the round tower 30 feet higher for the look of the thing. You watch George IV grow monstrous and hidden. He ends his days almost as shut away as his father, too fat and too ashamed to be seen, a recluse behind his own battlements, and the servants' hall notes the symmetry and is too wise to say it aloud. You're in the crowd in the summer of 1830 when the flag comes down for him, and you notice what everyone notices. The bells toll the same, but the town does not cry. Then the sailor brother William, 7 years of him, a kindly shouting old salt. Then, on a June morning in 1837, the bells again, and the word runs up the hill from the coach office. The king is dead, and the new sovereign is a girl of 18, the baby from Kensington, the daughter of the duke who died 6 days before the old king in that same black January, Victoria. You're 36 that summer. You stand in the quadrangle with your hat off among the whole staff when she first comes to Windsor, and she is tiny, smaller even than her grandfather was in the chair, a doll of a girl with heavy-lidded eyes, and she walks past the rank servants of the castle, and for 1/2 of 1 second she looks at you, the way the young look at the old furniture of a place, and passes on. She never knew him. He never knew of her. They missed each other by the width of 1 winter week. She 8 months old at Kensington, he singing Handel to the dark at Windsor, the whole future and the whole past of England asleep in the same January, 20 miles apart, never once in the same room. And she will reign even longer than he did. She will break his record that everyone said would never be broken, and men not yet born will stand in this same quadrangle with their hats off in another century's clothes and feel about her exactly what old Mrs. Cheveley felt in the linen room, and will iron her plain shirts and will keep her secrets. Some things don't change. You're old enough now to know it, and the knowing is not sad. It is the opposite of sad. It is the ground underfoot. You marry a Windsor girl, a clockmaker's daughter from Church Street. You have children. 2 leave. You tell them nothing about the rooms. On winter nights, when the north wind hoots over the chimney of your own small house below the castle wall, you sometimes stop whatever your hands are doing. Cracked old hands now yourself, and listen, and your wife has learned not to ask. And once only, you break the seal. You're past 70. It is the 1870s. There are railways under the castle hill and photographs in the parlour, and a telegraph office on the high street, and your granddaughter, who is 19, the exact age you were, is sitting with you by the fire because you've been ill and the family has begun, kindly and clumsily, to visit in shifts. And she asks, not to humour you, she genuinely wants it, you can always tell. Grandfather, is it true you served the old mad king, the one before the Queen? And you look into the fire for a long time, long enough that she thinks you've drifted, the way the old drift, and then you tell her about the sponge, about the lips that pulled at it like a lamb, about the singing, and the open hand on the counterpane, and the orange eaten behind the door, and Bot's hand on your shoulder, and the bell counting 81 through the frozen dark, and the flagpole bare against the stars. Not the state secrets. There are no state secrets. There never were. That was the great discovery of the rooms. Just an old man and the people who stayed. She does not say anything for a while. The fire ticks. Somewhere across the town, faint, the chapel bell marks the hour. The same bronze that told that night. The very same metal in the same tower. He couldn't hear anything at all, she says at last. or see all those years? Nothing, you say. Not a candle, not thunder. Then he never knew, she says slowly, working it out the way the young do, as if it had happened to someone real, which, you watch it occur to her, this is the gift. It did. He never knew that anyone was there. All that time you were all standing there and he never knew. And you look at your granddaughter in the gaslight, in the modern world, and you give her the one thing you took out of the rooms. The thing that has held up your whole long life like a beam, holds a roof. We knew, you say. That's what it's for. Now, come back. Slowly. Leave Thomas by his fire. He is well. He lives years yet. The granddaughter writes it all down one day in a copybook that ends up like everything, in a drawer, and come back up the long stair of years to your own room, your own bed tonight. But bring the day with you. Let's carry it once more, lightly, the way you carry a sleeping child from the cart into the house, not waking it, just holding the weight. Because that is what this channel is for, and because a weight of this one is worth feeling one last time before you set it down. A man was given the world at 22, not asked, given. An awkward, earnest, stubborn boy who liked farming and clocks and Handel and his own wife, handed the largest job on earth, and he gripped it with both hands for 50 years, and it broke him the way the sea breaks a stone, slowly from the inside, along the old cracks. America. The 19-hour ravings, the chair with the straps, Amelia's ring, warm from her dying hand. Remember me. And then 9 years in a warm cage at the top of a cold castle, blind as midnight, deaf as the stone, holding court for the beloved dead. And here is the thing to fall asleep on. Here is the thing the whole day was carrying, under the cold smoke and the sponges and the minute guns. He was never once left alone. Not for an hour, not for a night. 9 years inside a sealed vault of a body, and outside the vault the whole time hands. Bot's hands and Pappendiek's, and the farm-cracked hands of a 19-year-old nobody from Abingdon. Fires kept in, lips kept wet, shirts ironed plain, the way he liked them, by a woman he would never know was still doing it. A nation naming him in its prayers every Sunday. 60,000 bells waiting in their towers. A fat, ruined soldier son who came and held his hand and was gripped back by fingers that had forgotten everything except how to hold on. He never knew, and they stayed anyway. We knew. That's what it's for. You can let the castle go dark now. Room by room, the way it went dark that night after the riders galloped out, only backwards, the windows going out one by one along the north range, the kitchens, the halls, the long corridor where a page no longer needs to sit awake. Let the fires fall to embers. They have earned it. Everyone in this story has earned it. The town below the wall is asleep. The blacksmith's anvil is cold and quiet under its foolish, perfect black ribbon. The river slides under the bridge in the dark, the same river, saying the same thing it said past Runnymede and past the coronations. The thing rivers say, which is, this too moves on, and that is not a threat, it is a lullaby. And the old king is free. Say it once more, because it is true, and because it is the title of the whole day, blind, deaf, and finally free. No more bulletins, no more doctor's Latin, no more locked doors with the locks on the outside. Wherever the window opened onto that night, it opened, and whatever he was carrying, the colonies, the ring, the 60 years, he is not carrying it now. Nobody is asking you to carry anything either. That's the point of this hour. Whatever your version is, the work, the accounts, the people you're keeping the fires in for, the things you can't say in the hall. Set it on the night table. It will keep. It kept for kings. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof and a bed and a tomorrow that will take care of its own arriving. That's more than most of the people in this story had. That's enough. The sounds are getting further away now, or you're just listening less. Both are fine. The boundary is starting to blur, the way it does when the body decides all on its own kindly that consciousness is no longer required. Somewhere out there, the world continues. It always does. The watchmen walk their rounds. The riders carry their letters through the dark. The sextons sleep beside their silent ropes. The great and the small turn over in their beds, in castles and in attics. All of them just people trying to get through their days. Same as you, same as a king. Tomorrow there will be work. Tomorrow there will be noise and lists and the whole bright machinery of being alive. Tomorrow the fires will need laying again. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is only this. The dark room. The slow breath. The tide going quietly out over the shingle and coming quietly back in and going out and coming back. Yours does both. Yours has years and years of coming back. Steady as a minute bell, soft as a sponge touched to lips, patient as a man standing at a wall. Centuries have passed since that January night. The castle he died in still stands on its hill. The chapel bell that counted his 81 years still swings in the same tower. The vault under the choir floor still holds them all together in the dark. The king and Charlotte and Amelia, reunited under the stone where nobody could ever again be lost to anybody. The gas came and the wires and the engines and the wars he could not have dreamed, and the world changed past all recognition, exactly as it always threatens to. But people still live there, still work there, still sit up at night with their dying in castles and in cottages, keeping the fire in, wetting the lips, staying when staying is all that's left, which it always in the end is. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it finally took him, without a groan, without even a sigh, with someone's good hand nearby. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've kept your watch. You've earned this rest. Take it and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.